Good evening. Shalom Aleichem. Moranan v'Rabbanan v'Rabbaisai Kol HaKol HaKadosh Hazeh. My name is Chaim David Zwiebel. I am the Executive Vice President of Agudas Yisrael of America. And it's my very special schus to chair tonight's Kinnus Hisayrus, which was scheduled by the Meyetzes Gedolei HaTorah of America for the purpose of bringing people together in these such difficult times, such challenging times, times when people are losing their parnasa, losing their health, even Rachmana litzlan, their lives. The time of the closing of our yeshivas and Beis Yaakovs, the terrible repercussions of those closings, the difficulties that families are facing when their children are not able to go to yeshiva, the challenges that our bochrim and our young girls are facing without a structured program of limud and chinuch. The chasanas that we're not able to make the way we used to. Access to our shuls being severely restricted. Dealing with rising tide of anti-Semitism. These are all things that are happening at an unprecedented pace and for reasons that we never would have fathomed. Nobody could have ever imagined. And we all know what's going on, and none of us know what will be going on. Nistarim Darkei Hashem, ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are not always apparent and visible. And so we talk to ourselves and we say, so what should we do? What should our shtadlonus be? What should our advocacy be? Should we go to the court? Should we not go to the court? How do we deal with the anti-Semitism? All of these different questions that we're grappling with, and we deal with what can we do to help Yidden who are out of work, who have lost their parnasa? How do we deal with the elderly? All these different questions that we are correctly occupied with that are totally taking over our time, our consciousness, our energy. And that's exactly as it should be. But the ultimate question, V'yato Yisrael, Mo Hashem Elokecha Shayel Me'imach. What is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us? Why has this come upon us? Chanan Wasserman, Hashem Yinka Imdamai, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. He writes in Kaivetz Ma'amorim that we're supposed to look at the world. Zachar Yamai Sailam, remember the history of the world. Binu Shnais Dar Vadar, understand the generations, the changing generations, each generation. Understand what's going on in current events. It's a mitzvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to contemplate and to try to understand history and to try to understand current events. And how does one do that? Sha'ala vicha v'yagedcha zikeinecha v'yamrulach. Don't philosophize on your own. These are questions that you need to ask. Ask your elders. Ask the Talmidei Chachamim. Ask the Gedolei Torah. Because ultimately, b'chol ha'aretz mishpatav, writes Rabbi Chanan. And throughout the entire world, throughout the entire land, mishpatav are the mishpatim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the laws of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the laws of the Torah. That's what's visible throughout the world. Ve'al ha'medina is bayei yomer. Rosh Hashanah, everything is decreed through all the medinas, for all of the different countries and continents, of course the entire world. Everything is Mishpatei Hashem. They're the judgment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And who better than the Gedolei Yisrael to be able to answer this question for us? Mo Hashem Elokecha Shayel Me'imach. What is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us? Those who are steeped in Limud HaTorah, in learning Torah, in Harbatas Torah, in spreading the growth of Torah and learning of Torah, those whose views of the world and whose values are shaped by the Torah HaKadoshah, those whose lives are dominated by people coming and speaking to them about their problems and their difficulties, which have to be analyzed through the lens of Torah. Sha'ala vicha v'yagedcha zekeinecha v'yamrulach. And that's why we're here tonight. I've said on a number of occasions that on the night of the Seder, by Manishtana, the Haggadah says, it's actually a Mishnah, the Kan HaBen Shayel. This is where the child the youngest in the family in the case of Manishtana, here's where he asks the question of Manishtana. What is different about this night of Pesach? And I've always said about Agudas Yisrael, if there's one catchphrase that captures the most chashuv role of Agudas Yisrael, it's V'kan haben shayel. Right over here, within the Agudah, where we have Baruch Hashem, we have Sha'al Avicha v'yagetcha, we have our Talmidei Chachamim whom we can speak to and ask for Hadracha and guidance. And we have Baruch Hashem people who look up to the Balei Horah, to the Gedolei Yisrael, to make sense out of things that are so difficult to understand. That's what Agudas Yisrael is all about. And that's why we're so privileged tonight that on the basis of the Hadracha of the Mayetzes Gedolei HaTorah, we have 5 Chaverim of the Mayetzes Gedolei HaTorah who are here with us tonight to inspire us, to lift us, to lead us, to help us see more clearly, to help us understand the world, this so complicated world, and to understand what is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking of us, is demanding of us through these difficult times. It's my schus to call upon Rav Hillel David Shlita, who's the Rav of Kehilas Yeshiva Sharei Torah in Flatbush, member of the Mayetzes Gedolei HaTorah, to lead us in Amiras Tehillim. Harav David Shlita.
Simin Kuf Chaf Aleph. Shalom Alois. Esoin Hayel HaHorim Meyayin Yavayazvi. Ezri Meyim Adonai Oisei Shamayim V'ores Al Yitein Ramoit Zaglecho Al Yonom Shoymerecho Hinei Lo Yonom V'lo Yishon Shoymer Yisrael Adonai Shemerecho, Adonai Tzilecho, Ayad Yeminecho, Yemom Hashemesh Lo Yakecho, V'yareach B'laylo, Adonai Yishmerecho Mikol Ro, Yishmer Es Nafshecho, Adonai Yishmer Seisecho V'yecho, Me'atov Yadaylon. Kapitel Kuf Lamed. Shir Hamalois Mimamakim Kosicho Adonai Adonai Shema B'Chali Yenas Necha Kashuvais L'Kel Tachanunai Im Adonai Tishmar Yo Adonai Yemi Yamai Ki Imcha Salicha Laman Tivorei Ki Visi Adonai Kivsa Nafshi L'Dvarai Hechalti Nafshi Adonai Mishaymedim Laboiker Shaymedim Laboiker Yachel Yisrael El Adonai Ki im Adonai HaChesed V'habei Moifedus V'hu Yiftes Yisrael Mikol Adonai Sov. Kapitel Kuf Mem Beis. Maskil lo David b'yisai b'ma'aras ilo Kaili el Adonai ezok Kaili el Adonai ezchanon אשפך לפניו שיחי, סורסי לפניו אגיד, וסתף עלי דרכי, ואתה ידעת נוסיף עשי, באילך זו אהלך, תמנו פח לי. הבית ימין הוא לי, ואילי מכיר, עבד מנויס ממני, אין דייס לנפשי. זועקתי אליך אדוני, עמדתי אתה מחסי, חלקי בארץ החיים. הקשיבו אל נשיא, גדולei סימויד, הצילני מרודפי, כי עמסו ממני. הוציאה ממסגר נפשי, לא ידעס את שמך, בי יחתיל צדיקים, כי סגמל עלי.
It is our zchus tonight to hear from the Zakan Rashi Yeshiva here in America, Rav Goyen Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky Shlita Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshiva, Philadelphia, Chaver Meyetzes Gedolei HaTorah.
It's a pleasure to address the community and the Jewish community in America. We're living in very difficult times. We are living in times that Klal Yisrael has to not to be able to go to a shul, not to be able to some places where you learn and you cannot keep it open, where people cannot get together. That's very difficult for Klal Yisrael, because Klal Yisrael are mashpiim on one another. Mashpiim means they give persons one help the other in every aspect of life, especially in Judaism. Become a Jew, you cannot live by yourself. You have to live with a society, with a group of people. And we are blessed by Hashem in America, that communities meet together and they work together and they have a big atzlacha. They matzliach, whatever they undertake. So therefore, we have to think, what can we do to improve the situation of Klal Yisrael together? Klal Yisrael together, when they speak about Tumultuous, that's something that uplifts Klal Yisrael. That's how we can impress one another. But impress people that we are not alone, we are all together, then that is the strongest bind, the strongest influence that we can have in Klal Yisrael. Can tell influence. Our entire life is influencing others to bring people closer to the Rabbeinu Shalom. That is our aim. Klal Yisrael aim is to bring the Klal Yisrael closer to the Rabbeinu Shalom, whichever way you can do, by learning together, by inspiring other, by introducing other to Yiddishkeit. We live in a world, unfortunately, especially here in America, where there is a great part of our Judaism is laxed by Klal Yisrael, unfortunately. The situation brought by influence from the outside, that's for sure. We are influenced from the outside community. But if you would be closer to a Torah community that tries to learn with us, teach us to become Yiddish Eden mit dem ganzen Herzen, Aida aus seiner Eid mit dem ganzen Herzen, bechol libo bechol nafshei. That's what the Eid has to be, a Jew. So therefore we have to think what could be combine us together that we'll be able to influence one another, to become better. to become closer to the Rabbanu Shalom. First, of course, by doing mitzvahs. There's a shul that brings us together. A shul is also something that brings us closer to the Rabbanu Shalom. We daven together. Get up in the morning, early in the morning, before we even learn, before we open a sefer. Some people learn before davening, but some learn even daven before they start to daven. They learn before and then they daven. What is davening? Davening means that you're speaking to the Rabbanu Shalom. You ask the Rabbanu Shalom that he should help you. When he goes to work later, he should have parnasa. You should help him in health, but you need a refuah shlema. You need the Rabbanu Shalom, you need the entire day, the entire life. And that's what we have to think. What can we do for Klal Yisrael? That we should unite together, more united we are. We have to be united in all aspects. That's the chiv of Klal Yisrael. That's what Klal Yisrael's mechayev, that metzius, that people should be closer to one another. So therefore, it is my suggestion that people should think, what can I do for you? What can I do for my friend? What can I do for Klal Yisrael? What can I do for my other members of Klal Yisrael? And I think we would think what we can do for others, we would improve ourselves. We would become closer to the Rabbanu Shalom. And I think that is the closest we can get to the Rabbanu Shalom. Each one person can get to the Klal Yisrael as much as he really desires. And that's the koyach of every Jew, that he can get close to Klal Yisrael. And my bracha is, should continue to work together with Klal Yisrael, help Klal Yisrael, think what can you do for others. That is the closest thing you can think for Klal Yisrael. And that will bring you closest to the Rabbanu Shalom and closer to Klal Yisrael.
Yashakaychachem Rosh Yeshiva should be gesund and stark. And it's now my schus to call upon Harav Yitzchak Sorotzkin Shlita, Rosh Yeshivas Tel, the Mesifta to Lakewood, to be ma'ir the tzibur in the way that only he knows how.
Is finding itself in the midst of a tremendous Eisori Yaakov. Corona has once again become rampant, and the Moishlim, the rulers of the world, who are Soine Hashem and Soine Hadas, have been goizer, Rachmana Litzlan, lockdowns on our yeshivas, on our boti medrash, on our boti knesiyas, and they're taking away from us all our ruchnias. And chas v'sholem, that we should think this is merely a mikra, or to think it's those moishlim that are causing us the tzoreh. But we have to versteh that it's all coming from the Ribono Shel Olam. And we have to be doirish and to try and find out, what does the Ribono Shel Olam want from us? What do we have to do to get rid of all these gzeiras and all these sorrows? And we're going to, Mirz Hashem, focus on three things that the Ribono Shel Olam wants from us in this time, in this Eis Sorah. And the first thing that we want to focus about is the first Ani Maimin. The first Ani Maimin is that the Ribono Shel Olam is hu levadoi osa v'oise mais l'chol ha'maisim. It's the Ribono Shel Olam who does and orchestras everything that happens in the world. There is nothing that doesn't happen from the Ribono Shel Olam. Rebbe Chonon in Kovetz Mamorim writes, the tev of people is that when the going is good, they attribute the success to themselves. They think it's my chochmeh, koichi voitzim yodi oseli asachayel hazeh, or they think it's my tzidkis that I got where I got. But when things go bad, nobody points the finger to themselves, but they always are toilet in different, they rationalize with different sibit. And he says this is the hepech of das Torah. The Ashkofa of Torah is there is no Teva, like the Ramban writes and the boy. Everything comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. When you do the Ratzon Hashem, then we live a good life. And Chalila, when we're Mamri Pi Hashem and we don't do the Ratzon Hashem, so the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us Oinshin. So we have to versteh it's the Rebbeinu Shalom that's doing everything that's taking place, and there's nobody else that's involved in what happens. You know, Rabbi Yerucham, the Mashgiach of Mir, says a tremendous yisoid in Tefillah Be'ez Soreh. The tendency of people is when there's a tzoreh, they focus on getting rid of the tzoreh. And they daven merely to get rid of the tzoreh, and he says that's a tremendous mistake. The Torah, the Rebbeinu Shalom, gave us the tzoreh for us to daven, not to get rid of the tzoreh, nor for the tachlis of davening. Now, what does that mean, that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us the tzoreh to daven to him? The Mabit, when he explains what the essence of Tefillah is all about, he says Tefillah is lessons in Emunah. Tefillah is chizuk in emunah. When we daven, and every time we mention that everything is coming from the Rebbeinu Shalom, we get to the recognition al chayenu ha-mesurim biyodecha, that our lives are totally dependent on the Rebbeinu Shalom. We can't take care of ourselves, but rather it's the Rebbeinu Shalom who gives us everything. The Ramchal writes that the tachlis of the Bria is to get to the core of Ein Oid Mulvadoi. And the Mashgiach Rabbi Yerucham from the Mir makes a tremendous insight that he prophesied 100 years ago. And he says, if the tachlis is to get Ein Oid Mulvadoi, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to have to pull apart the world at the seams in the Seif of Ikvus and Mashiach. And he's going to take away any samchis, anything that we think we have security and that we can rely on. And he says people tend to rely on parents. Parents sometimes rely on children. You rely on kroivim, and the Rebbeinu Shalom will show you can't rely on a parent. You can't rely on a child. You get cut away from your family. There's no samchis of family. And the same, he says, financial stability. You can't rely on finances. You can't rely on doctors. You can't rely on hospitals. There's nothing that we can rely on. The Rebbeinu Shalom is going to remove from us any mishon, anything that a person is going to think that he could rely on in Gashmias. But then he says another niveldike thing, and he says the Rebbeinu Shalom at the end of the Bria is going to take away our ruchnias dike samches. We think we have Torah that we can rely on, we have Tefillah that we can rely on, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to show us there's nothing that we can rely on and feel secure with. We have to come to the realization the Rebbeinu Shalom is taking away all the samchas, whether it's ruchnias, loy b'tzidkosi, it's not for my tzidkis that I can rely on anything. But the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to recognize ein oid mulvadoi, ein lanu li'ishoyin el avinu shebashamayim, that we should turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom miktoich the gewaltige hakore, that ein oid mulvadoi, this is the tachlis of what the Rebbeinu Shalom is doing, this upheaval in the world, to turn over the world that nobody has any security, nor to realize that the Eibishter is in control of the world and everything is governed by the Eibishter. This is the first tshuva that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from us. You know, on the onset of Corona, Reb Chaim told us what we have to do, what tshuva we have to do. And Reb Chaim said we have to do tshuva on the chet of Lashon Hara. We have to do tshuva on sinas chinam. And he added another thing, and he added also tshuva on gaiva. Gaiva is the shayrish of sinas chinam and Lashon Hara. And I want to share with you a Meir Dike Michtav Meliol, the way he explains our golus and our geula. And he explains the Rebbeinu Shalom has an hogge with us, midah keneged midah. When we do something and the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to recognize what does he want from us, he gives it in a way of Mida Keneged Mida. And he explains the Shoirish of the Churban Bayasheni was Sinas Chinam. Sinas Chinam, he says, comes from Gaive. You feel you're superior. You feel Koichi Voitzim Yodi, you are in control, and therefore you could look down at others and not Rachmana Litzlan, feel for others. Instead of feeling for them, you have Sina for them. He says this is the Mead of Edom. This is the Mead of Esav. The Mead of Esav is Gaive. The meat of Esav is they want to control the world. They think they're in power of everything. They have Zokter Anhoge of Ritzicha L'Shem Ritzicha. They feel they can kill you, and it's coming out so clearly. This is Esav. This is Edom. They're so arrogant. The Moishlim are so arrogant. This is what they are. They're arrogant, and Reitzchim, that's what they're. That's the Anhoge of Esav. To the farthest extreme that has come out through the whole Kufa. And the Rebbeinu Shalom put us into that matzav that we should realize that we have to be masak in those areas, not to feel superior, not to think koichi voitzim yodi, not to walk around with gaiva, and that gives us the right to speak lashon hora and sinas chinam. I want to share with you a beautiful insight from the Mashgiach Rematisho. The Ramban writes in the Parshas Boy that the tachlis of the Bria is to recognize that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the Boire. That's part of the first Ani Maimin. And he explains what does it mean to recognize that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the Boire. And he says a person walks around with a gaiva, and he feels that koichi v'oitzim yodi osali asachayil azeh. When the going is good and when there's not an eisora, everybody thinks that, I'm in control of my life. I can take care of my life. Because people think it's koichi v'oitzim yodi, and we rachman litzlan, when it's rom levovcha, you shochachtas Hashem olekecha ki hu anoisen l'cha koyachayil. Now there's a medrash in Bereishis. There's 4 people that go through Terem Soris, and they have the chiyuv when they get saved to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom. When you're in a Sor, you realize it's coming from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And when the Rebbeinu Shalom helps and gives you a Yeshua, there's a proclamation that these people make. What is their proclamation? Du ki Hashem hu Elokim. Realize. I came to that realization that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the one that causes everything. He's the one in control of everything that happens in the Bria. Hu asanu, he made us. V'loi anachnu, we have to serve them. Now that's the Kri. The Kri is loy with a vav, which means we're servants to the Rebbeinu Shalom. But there's a ksiv there, and the ksiv is loy with an aleph. V'loi anachnu. So the Medrash says, what does it mean you proclaim, who a son of the Rebbeinu Shalom made us, v'lo yanachnu? You could walk around like Parah, the Medrash says, and think that attribute your success to yourself. I'm successful. Koichi voitzim yodi oseli asachayil hazeh. I got where I got because I know how to do things, and I have seichel, and I have merits, and I have intuition, and I have the know-how to get to places. And the people who go through a tzorig wake up, and it's a wake-up call to realize it's coming from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and not you are doing what you are doing, but the Rebbeinu Shalom is the one who's orchestrating everything. This Mizmer L'Soida is not merely said by the Arbot Tzrichim L'Hoidis, nor every Yid has to say it every morning. If we listen carefully to what we say, we get up in that Mizmer and we tell the Rebbeinu Shalom, I want to thank you for everything, because everything I have do, I proclaim that you are Hu Elokim, you made me, not me. It's not that I caused my success. V'lo yanachnu. But the tendency, Dr. Matisho, is to think differently. And this is what the Ramban means. The tachlis of the Bria is to get to this recognition that not only recognize there's no teva, but realize there's no koichi v'oitzim yodi oseli asachayil hazeh. Everything that you have is only coming from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for what he gives you. And now we want to go to the third thing of why the Rebbeinu Shalom has made such a lockdown on all the Bati Knesias, Bati Medrashas, Yeshivas, Chadorim, Talmud Torahs, Rachmana Litzlan, what it caused in such a Churban HaTorah, this Machle and all the Gzeiros that came about from the Moishlim. It never happened in the history to such a degree that it should cause such a lockdown worldwide. What is the Rebbeinu Shalom wanting besides the cheshbon that we mentioned, that to take away all our securities, even ruchnias? There's a nifladike Chasam Sofer in the droshes. The Chasam Sofer writes that by the Churban Bayis Rishon, when Klal Yisrael went in Golis in Poras and Modai, they were complacent in Poras and Modai. They were having a great life. Ruchni Yazdik and Gashmi Yazdik. They were successful, Gashmi Yazdik, and they were prosperous, and the Goyim loved them where they lived. And then the same thing was, they said they flourished Ruchni Yazdik wise. And when that happened, you know what happened? They had no desire to go back to Eretz Yisrael. They didn't, very few people wanted to go back to Eretz Yisrael. And when that happened, the Rebbeinu Shalom made a melech kosher Haman to be goyzer on Klal Yisrael. You're under the rulership of a Haman, and the Haman is goyzer lahashminu lahargu labid. And realize that don't think you can be complacent and you could live in Golus. That's not your home. The Rebbeinu Shalom did it, Zok the Chasam Sofer, to awaken in Klal Yisrael the longing and the yearning and the bikush to get back to Beis Hamikdash and to come back. The Shechina should come back. That the Tzar Sar Shechina Begalusa, the Kvoid Malchus Shemayim should once again return. And the Chasam Sofer says this is going to happen in Achvis Hayomim. And he explains the psukim that the tshuva that we have to do in Achvis Hayomim is the same what they had to do. And he says the tshuva is we have to have tsar for the Golis, tsar for the Churban, tsar for the Shechina Begalusa, not having the ruchnias of the Beis Hamikdash and everything that was involved with leaked in the lifestyle of the Halakha lifestyle of having the Shechina in our midst. And he says this is the tshuva that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from us. B'tzar l'cha means, when it says in the pasuk, b'tzar l'cha, it means you should have tsar on the Golus and the Churban and be mitzapeh for the Yeshua. I want to bring out a few things that we have a bekoyach to do and what we should do. And this is the Chafetz Chaim says that don't daven to get rid of the tzorah. That is not what our focus is all about. The Chafetz Chaim says all tzorahs are a result of the Churban, as a result of Shechinta Begalusa. This is the mocker of all our Peronius. And we have to daven, Zok the Chafetz Chaim, for the Gula, for Malchus Shemayim, for Binyan HaMikdash, for the Rebbeinu Shalom Shechina to return. And he says people make a big mistake when they daven Shemoneh Esrei. And he says people, when they daven Shemoneh Esrei, they make their focus on Parnoseh, on Refuah, and all these different things, but they put little dogesh on the brachas that talk about Gula, on the brachas that talk about Binyan Yerushalayim, Binyan HaMikdash, getting back the Shechina. And he says if we would have the Beis HaMikdash, then we wouldn't have all these sources and there wouldn't be a need for davening for these things. And he says when you daven Shemoneh Esrei, put your focus on those brachas that talk about the Shechina Begalusa, on the Sechazenu Ineinu B'Shuvcha L'Tzion B'Rachamim, the Shalayim Ircha B'Rachamim Toshuv, about Kibbutz Golias, about Binyan Yerushalayim, Malchus Shamayim. This is what is imperative on us to do. Now I want to share with you a Mabit. The Mabit says every generation has davened for the Gula. And people think, what is going to help me to daven? They davened for so many years for the Gula and we haven't got the Gula. And he says it's a mistake to think like that. Every Tvila helps in bringing the Gula. Everybody who davens adds to the previous generations, and it's not just our generation that is our davening is going to bring the gula. But if we add that to the previous generations, it could be that's what's missing, this extra tefillas that we have. And he writes that it's our chiyuv to daven for the gula more than any other generation. And he says the generation that's closer to the Soif HaBriyah, the generation that's living in the Ikvis of the Mashiach, the world only stays for 6,000 years. He says they are the ones that there's going to be a meira dikatvi on them if they don't daven for the Gula and they don't daven for Binyan HaMikdash and Achzor Sashchina. It's because they are the ones that if it's closer, it's easier to cause the Gula to come about. If it's farther away, it's more difficult. But the more we're in Golis, the easier it is to get out of that Golis if we would take it daven properly to get out of the Golis. The Chofetz Chaim explains to us it's not enough just to daven for the Gula, but you have to be Toiveya the Gula, and you have to ask the Ribbono Shel Olam, I want the Gula, I need the Gula. Tviya, it's imperative. I need the gula. I feel the tsar. Not just daven, but you should be teveya and demand it from the Ribbono Shel Olam. And you should feel that you can't exist. Klal Yisrael cannot exist without the Malchus Shemayim, without bringing back the Kovod Shemayim, because that's the Tachlis Abriya. The Tachlis Abriya is Kol Anika B'Shmi L'Chvoidi B'Rosiv. Kol Pol Hashem L'Manei on Rosh Hashanah. That's what we're busy in our tefillas, focusing on getting back the Kovod Malchus Shemayim, that the goyim shouldn't step and be mechalel Shem Shemayim. This is what we have a choiv. The Ribbono Shel Olam has locked up the Boti Knesiyas and the Boti Midrashas, the Migdash Ma'atz, that we should focus on the real Beis HaMikdash. We should focus on Kimitzi and Teitzei Torah, the Dvar Hashem that comes out of Yerushalayim. As long as we feel we're successful in Chutz La'aretz and we're in control and we can flourish Ruchnius, we totally forget B'chlal that there's the Ribbono Shel Olam in Golis and that we're in Golis and our homeland is Eretz Yisrael. Let us realize that we are in Golis and that we have to yearn to get back Tzviya Yeshua. We have to be Mevakesh the Yeshua. We have to be Teveya the Yeshua. And I want to share with you another Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim brings a psikte that when a person is not mechake for Malchus Shemayim, there's a meir diketvi on the person, and the way it's brought out in the psikte, it's miyuched a tvi on Bnei Torah. Bnei Torah, the Medrash says that you are mechaviv my Torah. Aren't you looking forward to when I could be a melech? Why aren't you focusing your life's gear to bringing back Mashiach, to bringing back Malchus Shemayim? And this has a koyach of being mekar of the geula. There's a yalkut in Eicha. The yalkut says at the time of Churban Abayis, the Ribbono Shel Olam said to Yitzchak Avinu that, you know, there's going to be a matzav of Golis, and he got worried, and he said, Ribbono Shel Olam, maybe we'll never come back. Maybe we're going to be so long in Golis, we're not going to get back to Eretz Yisrael. And the Ribbono Shel Olam said, don't speak like that. There's going to be a generation that's going to be mitzapel malchusi, that's going to come forward and looking forward for when the Malchus Shemayim is going to come back. And when that happens, the Medrash says, miyad heim nigolim, then we will go out of this bitter Golus, like it says, V'yesh tikva lachrisoch num Hashem. There's hope that we should go out of Golus. V'shavu bonim ligvulam. The Ribbono Shel Olam wants from us to be mechakem mitzapeh lemalchusai, to be mitzapeh that we should be zoichet to Malchus Shemayim. We're just going to reiterate Nachamol. The 3 pointers that we brought out were, number one, to realize that there is no teva. There's no thing that you think that things happen and we focus on getting going in Sibis and think that this is what caused it. This Moshel caused it. This is the cause and that's the cause. It's all coming from the Ribono Shalom, and the Ribono Shalom wants us to recognize that Ein Oid Milvadoi. He wants us to recognize Hu Levado Osa V'Oise V'Yase Kol HaMaisim. That's what happens when we're prosperous. In Golus, we totally forget, and we think that we're in control, and we forget that everything comes from the Ribono Shalom. And the second thing is Tshuva and Sinas Chinam. Tshuva and Loshen Hore, Tshuva and Gaive. The Shoirish of Sinas Chinam is Gaive, and the Ribono Shalom put us into Malchus Edom, and now it came out so clear, the Gaive, the haughtiness of all these rulers. These rulers, they're Gaive, and they're Ritzicha, Rachmana Litzlan, Ritzicha L'Shem Ritzicha, that is the meat of Esav and Edom. And the Ribono Shalom put us in that matzav to realize what we have to be masakin. We have to be masakin that gaiva, that koichi voitzim yoni. Realize that we're b'yosecha anachnu, it's not us, and therefore we won't feel arrogance over our chaver, and we won't have sinas chinam, no, we will fakir to have a havash yisrael. And the third thing is, what the Ribono Shalom wants us is that we should ask the Ribono Shalom, take us out of Golus. We want Malchus Shemayim. It pains us, the Tsar of the Shechina. We want the Karenu B'Binyonoi, V'Samchenu B'Sikunoi. We're begging the Ribono Shalom. The Ribono Shalom has to bring it in a way that you recognize. He closed up everything in Chutz La'aretz, everything in Golus, and he wants us to realize, I want you to be Dairish the Beis HaMikdash, not Mikdash Ma'at. Don't be satisfied with Mikdash Ma'at. No, like the Chassam Sofer says, our tshuva v'achvis hayomim is to want to get back to Eretz Yisrael and to feel the pain and to daven that we should get back to Beis HaMikdash, Malchus Shemayim b'tifarto, that we should be zoichet to see v'sechazeno eineinu b'shuvcha l'tzion b'rachamim.
Yashkei Chacham Rosh Yeshiva, it's a special pleasure and a privilege to call upon Rav Shimon Yehuda Svei, Rosh Yeshiva and Yeshiva of Philadelphia, Chaver Mayetzes Gedolei HaTorah.
Klal Yisrael finds itself in a serious situation. In many locations, but the Knesiyas, but the Midrashas have been curtailed or severely restricted, attendance is severely restricted. This has caused many moistes to close down entirely. In other locations, they're afraid that they're about to face the same restrictions. This is all besides the disease itself, which has claimed many kabbanas, among the finest Klal Yisrael has to offer, and the machla still rages on. This each one of us has to ask a question that the Medrash asked. The Medrash says that the Shvatim, when they came from Mitzrayim, Shvatim Etziyah Matzu, Ksiv Vayechadu Vayetze Libam. That the Shvatim, when they came from Mitzrayim, they opened the sacks and they found the treasure. They were fearful. Vayechadu Vayetze Libam. They were fearful and faint of heart. So the Medrash says, Anu Shabadna Reb Simon, we that we have sustained the loss, Alachas Kam V'Kama, we surely have to ask this question. Anyone who's affected, any Yirei Shemayim, that sees a change in the course of nature, HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs this world according to the laws of nature. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends a shliach, his messengers, Ruach Sa'ara Isa Dvarei, his messengers, a strong wind, an earthquake, a new virus that changes the course of events, that changes the course of nature, changes how we live, we have to ask ourselves this question. What does Hashem want from us? In previous generations, there was a Navi, there was a Raya. The Malbim explains the difference between a Navi and a Raya. The Navi, a Raya, was able to, was revealed to a Raya private individuals' affairs. That which was happening or was going to happen to a private person was revealed to the Raya. A Navi was only received a nevuah about the shortcomings and the transgressions of the tzibur. Today we don't have a raya, we don't have a navi, we have no one to tell us exactly what our personal shortcomings are, and what the shortcomings of the tzibur are, how we should be masakin ourselves. So we don't know what we should be doing. In the time of the Teisus Yom Tif, he was masakin. He was masakin tikunim for the tzibur because of the terrible things that happened, the tragedies that happened in his lifetime, based on what was revealed to him in a chalaim. We don't have a Teisus Yom Tov either. So how are we supposed to know how to react to these things that are going on around us? I'm surely not qualified to speak to the tzibur or to lecture to them. Surely not about shortcomings and transgressions from which I myself certainly suffer, and I recognize my deficiencies. However, as such, I will be speaking to myself, and I will allow you to listen in. There is no doubt that the closures and limitations placed on about the Knesiyas, about the Midrashas, and about the Chinuch are all a deepening, a hamaka of the Galus. When we were Zeichet HaMishkan and Beis HaMikdash, we had a place in this world, a pure and pristine place, pure from Chet and pristine from impurities, which was untainted by the world around it, and the Shekhinah was Sheira there. And anyone that came to that place automatically was able to connect to the Shekhinah. Anyone who entered Beis HaMikdash was elevated by the Giluyim of the Kadosh Baruch Hu that he saw in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash, and he was able to connect with the Shekhinah. After the Churban, all this was lost. We have no place, we have nothing left except Ein La Kadosh Baruch Hu Be'lam El Adal Lam Shalach B'Lvad. The only thing we have left is the Bat Knesiyos, about the Midrashas, that a person can go there and connect with the proper preparation and introspection. He could connect with the Shekhinah. These are our oases in a turbulent world around us, a place where we can find a measure of purity, a rarefied air, a place of ruchniya separated from the world around. Surely it is only with the dag of hestaponim that we can attain in these places, but at least it's a place where you can connect with the Shekhinah. So any restriction placed on what the Midrashas is a deepening of the Galus. It is a deeper level of Churban, it is a deeper level of Galus. The Ramban in B'chukaysai on the pasuk Nesatim Mishkanim B'seichem L'Sigol Nafshi Eschem, the Ramban says V'haklal Ki b'Yis Yisrael Shleimim, when Klal Yisrael was complete, they were complete in the Avodas Hashem. Le'isnaig in Yonam B'teva Klal, the private matters were not governed by nature or by the natural course of events. Ki yivarech Hashem lachmam u'meimeim, Hashem blessed their food and drink, v'yasam achlam b'kirbam, and he removed sickness from them. Like it says in the pasuk, v'rachti es lachmcha v'esmeimecha v'asireisam achlam b'kirbecha. So the Ramban continues that actually it's tachel l'reife, they don't need a doctor, u'lishtamer b'derech medayke refuas klal, or to take the precautions in the way prescribed by doctors. He brings that we find that Tzidkiyahu HaMelech, when he was sick, he called a Navi, not a Reife. When people were sick from Averis, they called a Navi to heal them. The Ramban ends off, Mal Reife, Ma Chelik L'Reife B'beis Eiser Ritzayin Hashem. What is a doctor doing in the house of somebody who's Eiser Ritzayin Hashem? Rabbi Yerucham explains this Ramban based on the Maimon Chazal, Makabel of oil Torah, Ma'avir Mimenu Ol Malchus Ve'ol Derech Eretz. Somebody is Makabel on himself. He recognizes he has a gil. He recognizes the Shechina. He sees a gili Shechina, and he's Makabel on himself. Ol Malchus Shemayim. The Eibusher removes from him Ol Malchus, the yoke of governments, the rule of governments. And all the cheretz, the oil, the yoke of the cheretz, means that because he is become shaykh tel yonim, he raises himself up, and now he's shaykh tel yonim, so he's not governed by the natural course of events in the world, but he's not governed by, it's not subjugated to the rules of nature of this world, and therefore, when we're in the matzah of Hest upon him, we're not zeicha to this Gili Shechina, and we're in Golus from the Shechina. We're given over in the hands of the government of the Malchias, the governments of Goyim, and all the Acheretz in the hands of doctors. When we are suffering from a pandemic, we're completely in the hands of government and doctors. This is a deepening of the Golus. Both all Malchias and all the Acheretz, and specifically the closing and limited access to Bati Knesses, Bati Midrashis, are all a hamak of a deepening of the Golus. The Meshech Chochmah in the Parsha of the Teichacha describes the cycle of Golus. He says that when Klal Yisrael comes to a country where there was no previous Yishuv of Yidden, there's a period of calm for 100 or 200 years, during which Klal Yisrael is unified and they strengthen themselves, they build an infrastructure, but the chinuch, and they raise the level of Torah learning to a high level. This continues until they feel too comfortable. They forget they are Gerim, they forget they are strangers in a land that is not theirs, they begin to think they belong, they set down deep roots, and forget, they forget the longing for a spiritual salvation at the appointed time. A very strong wind comes, and it reminds them in a strong and clear voice, Yehudi, you are a Jew. This is not your place. Go to a place you did not recognize. We must always remember we are in Golus. We are not citizens like others. The side of Golus is to be transient. In Golus we are not planted. The opposite of Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael we have Menucha Nachla, we are planted in Eretz Yisrael. In Golus we have no permanent roots. Where we are in the cycle of Golus is not clear. But each one of us must do a self-inspection. Be baidik his lifestyle, how it fits with this description of Golus. This is the time when we are most vulnerable in Golus. When we begin to think we belong to society. This is our country, we don't feel like strangers. We speak the languages spoken around us, we participate in the public debate.
Wireless caller.
My Shver, Rebbe Baksatzal, he used to say over from Pascal that in Shachai, when the Mir Yeshiva was in Shachai during World War II, the summers were very hot and humid. It was unbearable. It was very hard to sleep. The local Chinese would sleep outside on the street. They would put something down and sleep on the street, where it was a little bit cooler. So Pascal said to Meshver, "Nu, could you do it also? Why don't you do the same thing?" And he answered, "You can't do it because you're not a balabas. There's some things that only a balabas could do. A balabas, the country belongs to them. They could do it. You're a foreigner. You can't do it." Is our lifestyle compatible with this concept? We need serious introspection to filter out filter out which of our behaviors are the behaviors and hagas of a balabas, of a citizen, of a person who has roots and rights and demands like all citizens. We are not ready to endure anything that crimps our lifestyle. We refuse to entertain the thought of downsizing the size of our houses, our simchas, our vacations, even at the point of endangering our health, and surely not for spiritual reasons or not to incite jealousy of the goyim. Why do we think these are our inalienable rights? Is this the proper Golus mentality? There's another point in the Malbim which you mentioned before. The Malbim is bothered by the back and forth between Shaul and his attendant about how to pay the Raya. The Malbim is bothered. We don't find that people paid Nevi'im. So the Malbim explains the difference between a Raya and a Navi that we said before, that a Navi has a Nevuah just about the whole Tzibur, and a Raya sees personal what's happening to each individual person. And he says, therefore, people would run after the raya because they wanted, for their own personal benefit, to find out how to get back in Aveda, Gzela. For their own personal benefit, they ran after the raya and they were ready to pay him. But the Navi, who was speaking about what the tzibur was doing wrong, that they didn't want to hear, that they weren't interested in. I think we see two nakudas in the Malbim. First of all, the Malbim is saying there's a taina we should run after our Gedolei Manhigim, not for our personal gain, what they can do to help solve our problems, but to learn from their actions and to listen to their messages and teachings. Secondly, I think there's a deeper message that the Malbim is saying, not to focus on private concerns, but rather on communal concerns. People are always faced with a conflict. All too often we face a conflict. Our personal benefit would prescribe one course of action. The communal good requires a different path. One that requires some discomfort on our part, or maybe even some more tangible sacrifice for the common good. What do we choose when we are faced with this conflict? Do we short-sightedly choose that which is self-serving and expect others to act with the common good in mind, or do we think communally? This is the deeper rebuke which lies in the Malbim's words, and it's a message which is very relevant in our times. Where is our focus? When we do not act communally, rather each person is worried about his own affairs, about his own problems, what's good for him. That is a bigger golus. In Yisrael, Klal Yisrael was unified together. A chelik of golus is separating from each other. When each person thinks about himself, that's also hamak of golus. That's a bigger golus, a deeper golus. We come together tonight as a reaction to an Eis Tzara. During a previous Eis Tzara, my father said a drasha, which he said over in the name of his Rebbe Rabban Zatzal. Rabban quotes a Gemara. The Gemara says in Tainis, "Bizman sheYisrael shruim b'tzar, bizman she'asiba shruim b'tzar, al yemer adam elech lebeisi v'eichel v'eshta v'shalom alay nafshi." A person has a chiyuv to be mishtatev with the tzara of Klal Yisrael. If a person says, I will eat and drink as long as my house will be peaceful, so the Gemara brings a pasuk that says, this Aveira will not be forgiven until Misa. Rabban points out that the same pasuk is brought like Chil Hashem in the Gemara in Yuma, so we see how big the chiyuv is. Chil Hashem is one of the worst Aveiras, and if the Gemara brings the same pasuk for both, we see how important it is to mishtatef in the tzar from the tzibur. Rabban also points out that the Gemara brings a mocker from Moshe Rabbeinu. The Moshe Rabbeinu sat on an Evan during Mechamas Amalek, and the Gemara asked, couldn't they find something softer for him to sit on? The Gemara says, you see that you have to mishtatef with the tzar of the tzibur. So Moshe Rabbeinu was mishtatef with the tzar of Klal Yisrael. Rabban says, even though the tzibur didn't gain anything by Moshe sitting on an Evan, on something hard, but still the chiyuv to mishtat with the tzar of the tzibur was mechayiv him that he had to sit on an Evan. My father said quite forcefully at that time that in the time of Saras and Yisrael, we must give up something. We must be ready to downsize some of our lifestyle, especially by simchas. Otherwise we are saying, I will eat and drink as long as my house is peaceful. This is how we can think communally, even when we can't directly affect the problem of the tzibur. There's still a way to think communally. The main thing is not to be broken by the current events, by the hard times we face, but to learn from them. It's brought down the name of Yerucham that he said on the Kinnah that we say on Tisha B'Av, B'tzeis Mitzrayim, B'tzeis Yerushalayim. The Kinnah contrasts the difference between going out of Mitzrayim and going out of Yerushalayim. And the Yerucham says that what the Kinnah is teaching us is that the same way, the same levels of Gilui Shechina that we could see in B'tzeis Mitzrayim, we're able to gain from B'tzeis Yerushalayim. I found a similar thought from Rabbi Yerucham on the Gemara. Gemara says about, Gemara in Gittin speaks about the 400 young girls and boys that were being taken after the Churban to Rome to be used by their captors. the only thing that was on their minds was if they jumped into the sea, when they realized what they'd been taken for, they wanted to be Meiser Nefesh, to jump into the sea. Their question was, will we be Zeichet Eilam Haba or not? Rabbi Yerucham wonders, where did they take this strength from? Where did they take that? They just witnessed the Churban. Everything that was holy was destroyed. The Beis HaMikdash was taken from them. Hundreds of thousands were massacred. Where did they take this strength to be that when the oldest one remembered a pasuk, Miboshan Ashiv Ashim Mitzulas Yam, the pasuk says, I will return those from the depths of the sea. They all jumped into the sea together b'simcha. Rabbi Yerucham says that they took this strength from the Churban that they witnessed. It says, Chesed Ashira, Mishpat Ashira. During times when the Beis HaMikdash stood, they were makar Hashem through His Chesed and His Teiva. When the Beis HaMikdash was Charav, they were makar Hashem by His Mishpat. At the time of Ha'aras Panim, they learned from Schar Mitzvah. At the time of Hester Panim, they learned from Ma Aveira Oisa. We also feel this. We see Histatu Panecha and a matzav of Hester Panim, Hayisi Nivo. We are completely lost. So we can learn from this also to be Makar Hashem and to want to be close to the Shekhinah. Just takes more concentration and the right focus. If we don't learn from this deepening of Galus, it is wasted on us. If we learn from here to re-examine our worldview and how it should shape our actions, to live like we are in Galus, more transient and focused communally, then we have internalized the message from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, B'zeicha, to a Geula from this Tzara and to Geula Shlema B'Karv.
Yashkei Chachem Rosh Yeshiva, and it's now a schus to call upon Rav Yankov Horowitz Shlita, who is the Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshiva's Beis Meir and Rav Kehilas Zera Kodesh in Borough Park, Chaver Meyetzes Gedolei HaTorah, to speak to us tonight.
Chachmei Zal tell us on the Pusik, Hein Kael Kaber Lo Yimos, the Chashivas of Tfilas HaRabim. And we hope that Tfilas HaRabim will be niskabel. Especially when we're standing Erev Bahab, the day that we say Anayni Hashem Anayni. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter once remarked that a darshan who is saying his drusha before Marev, if it will help that one person davens Marev better, the whole drusha was worth it, even if that person is the darshan himself. I hope to be zoichet to some mesoros myself. Meir v'Rabbi Yisai. Seldom do we find Yad Hashem touching to a whole world at once. Doira Mabel, Doira Fluge, the Dvar Hashem touched the whole globe. We are now standing in a matzif that the Shechina Agdoisha is crying out to the whole world. Like a Baskol saying, who is in charge? V'yayda kol puel ki hatu pialtoi. The Beira Olam, he shook up the whole medical world, financial world, political world. Let's attempt to reflect some points. Mu Hashem shoyel meyimchu. Yira, ahava, l'lechet b'chol deruchav, b'chol levavchu, b'chol nafshechu. The Parshas Hashviyah starts off with Lech Lechu, one of the Ayisuranus Yoinis Shenisnasa Behem Avrom Avini. Let us understand what is the Nisoyin of Lech Lechu. We do understand one living in a comfortable home, if he's told to head south to an unknown destination, it's a big Nisoyin. Pack his bags, leave everything, leave his hometown, leave his birthplace. A big Nisoyin. But at the end of the previous parasha, we find Terech and the whole Mishpucha already left their hometown. They're en route to Eretz Canaan. In transit, they stopped in Churon. What's the Nisoyin? When Avram is told to travel further south, is that big of a Nisoyin of Lech Lechu that the Medrash says is as big as Akaidah? The Chaim HaKudish is Masber. The Nisayan is mi baisavichu, mi artzichu, mi muladetechu. Go alone, leave everyone behind. Furthermore, explains the Rechaim HaKudosh, there was a problem. Lot came along. There was not the kiyum of Lech Lechu as yet. When we find that Lot left, Achar Hipured Lot, first then the Rebbeinu Shloilem says, Sunu Einechu Arai. First then Zukta Rechaim HaKudosh was the kiyum of Lech Lechu. Then was the kiyum of Hel Uretz Asher Areku. I will show you the land to where I want you to go. Kol Zman Lot was together with Avraham Avinu. There was no Lech Lechu yet. Not simple. Who was Lot? We find Lot was Moised Nefesh for the Maluchim. We find Lot Ufu Matzos. He baked matzos, and Rashi says that was on Pesach. Lot, one family alone in Zdoim, he's keeping tradition. He's keeping Pesach. He's being Moised Nefesh. What's wrong with having Lot come along together with Avraham Avinu? Why does not Lech Lechu start till after Lot has departed? Achai v'rayai. Lot saw fertile land. Eretz shekulei mashke. He was drawn to Tanugei Olam Hazeh, to lust and temptations, even though it was amongst Stoim v'Amoira. Lot doesn't care about the Sviva. His focus is on enjoying life. The Torah Deutsche teaches us that even though he was traditional, even though he was Moised Nefesh for some mitzvahs, he's counted as a Sdoimnik. Most of his family perished in Sodom. Alifai miyoduai. We live in a Dura Mabel. We can't focus on the American dream and be counted as Talmid of Shel Avraham Avinu. What in our definition is success? Whom do we try to emulate? Do we identify with Avraham or Chas v'Shulam with Lot? The Chofetz Chaim once met a Ruv. The time was between the two world wars, a very difficult man. A terrible Yerida to Yiddishkeit. The winds of Askula, communism, Zionism, they took over the Shtetlach. And the Ruchniistic Matzev was awesome. The Chofetz Chaim asks the Ruv, what's doing in your city? How is Shabbos? The Ruv gives a sigh. Oy Rebbe, what can I do? What can I do? Whatever I say falls on deaf ears. What's with Shabbos? And the Ruv gives another krechts. What can I do? What's with Chinuch? What's with Taras HaMishpucha? What's with Kashrus? On everything the Ruv answers the same krechts and the same answer. Rebbe, what can I do? The Chofetz Chaim tells him, I don't know what you could do. Aber Chalischen hast du gekannt. You should have fainted. You should have fainted from such a matzav. Is it really touching the depth of your heart? Or you just yoitza? If you would chalish, you would faint, things might be different. Our mitzvahs, is this our chiyas, Or is it an obligation to be yoitza? Where are our priorities? Is extra time spent on Torah mitzvahs or on Hevel Avolim? Where do we take children of Chalamoid? To meet a tzaddik, a Gedolei, or to the productions of Stoim V'Amoira? What's about tznius, especially for married women? The definition of tznius was meant not to attract attention. Do we think we have legal loopholes with lace top or long glamorous shaitels? Oi, what can we do? What can we do? Aber chalisch hast du gekannt. If somebody tested positive, I filled it 2 weeks ago. He came to a meeting without a mask. Would we be angry? Would we also feel angry about somebody that came to a meeting and talking rechilas and lashon hara? Are we bothered by Jewish media that mevaze Torah Gdoisha with lashon hara rechilas and likewise? What can we do? Aber chalish hast du gekannt. Where is our deep feeling? Baruch Hashem, b'siyata d'shmaya, we give tzedakah. But do we give maser? Or do we think we were yoitza? Rabbi Yisrael Meyer was a Yidden concentration camp. He had a job in the kitchen, the best of the esemakis. In the middle of the summer, he asked to be transferred to work in the field, hard labor, preparing for railroad tracks. Every day, he would bring back a twig under his clothes and put it under the bunkers. Erev Sukkos, he took out a big plank of wood, put it at a corner where it created 3 walls, put the twigs on top of it, had a tiny little sukkah. Hundreds of Yidden passed through on that night and made a leishav basukkah. Do we identify with this love for Torah and mitzvahs? How do we start? Can we make sure that the reading material that comes into our house is written by Shomrei Torah mitzvahs? Can we cut off any connection that we have to Stoim V'Amoira or even to Loit? Can we discharge the fun technology offers? Can we daven with more kavuna, remembering we're talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom? Can we bechazik and limit? Noise ba'oile becheset im chavayroi. The Heilige Baditchever, the Malabetz Chisan Klal Yisrael, once remarked, Rebbeinu Shalom, you put Mesechte Gehenim in the Sefer Reishis Chachma describing what Gehenim is all about. All the Tavas Olam Hazeh, the lusts and temptations in front of our eyes. Would you do the opposite? Put all the Tavas in the Reishis Chachma and the Gehenim in front of our eyes. I promise you, no Yid would ever sin. Shchina Hagdoisha. Klal Yisrael wants to do good. Klal Yisrael, Zer Avruam Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Ritzoinayni lasis ritzoinechu avinu shebashamayim. Deep down, every Yiddish neshama is shoyef lamala. Rabbeinu Shalom. Hashivayni Hashem elechu v'nushivu. Rabbeinu Shalom. Menam agayfu menachlusechu. Uvini malkaini shlach refiya shalayim u'lechoyle yamechu. Bebias goyel tzedek b'mahayru biyamayni.